You agreed to stay away!
I lied.
May the Fourth be with you and all that. We've gathered here today to talk about the plot of The Force Unleashed, an action-adventure game from 2008, back when Lucasfilm Games wasn't owned by the big mouse. Imagine that for a moment with me, if you would. Isn't it wonderful? While I personally have a lot of fondness for this game, I know a lot of people don't like it for being over-the-top, schlocky, or at odds with established lore. The last one is particularly bewildering since the lore of Star Wars is a wild morass of all kinds of cool shit happening all the time. The point that most seem to get hung up on is power levels, because in The Force Unleashed you play as this random guy with no connection to anyone we've seen or heard from before, and he is extremely powerful in the Force, powerful enough that Darth Vader himself mistook his presence in the Force for a grown Jedi's master when he was but a child. He's so impressed with this child's raw potential that he takes the kid on as a secret apprentice, teaching him the ways of the Force to one day help him overthrow the Emperor. Did you cringe a little just now? Does that sound like self-indulgent fanfic to you? I'm gonna need you to take that feeling, punt it into a lake, and enjoy being cringe for once, you fucking nerd. The Force Unleashed crashed through our doors with a bottle of tequila in one hand and a bag of speed in the other, so that Jedi Fallen Order could respectably walk its ass in the morning after with coffee and donuts. So let's get started. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to drop a comment telling me your favorite thing about Star Wars. Also, if you aren't familiar with Star Wars lore, I'm so sorry. We begin our journey with a classic title crawl explaining that we're in the aftermath of the Clone Wars when the Empire has risen, Darth Vader is power walking around like he isn't a freshly baked raw nerve, and there's a Jedi hiding out on Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld. Playing as Vader in the beginning allows us to get familiar with the game with minimal threats to our safety, and all the threats to the local Wookiees as we go about blasting down their defenses with the Force, cutting them down with our lightsaber, and launching them into low orbit or into the nearest cliff at Mach 1. You can also just bully the walking carpets by juggling them in the air as they flail helplessly in your invisible grasp, and it's consistently the funniest thing to do with your enemies.
What was that?
After much slashing, bashing, and Wookiee harassing, Vader reaches the home of a Jedi Knight in hiding, a survivor of Order 66. While the game only calls him Rogue Jedi, his name is Kento Marek, as revealed in the novelization written by Sean Williams. The novelization provides more context and detail than the game does about its own events, but as I said in the previous video about Crisis 2, a game should stand on its own rather than having to rely on supplementary material. So he's Mr. Dad Jedi now, and you'll see why I called him that shortly. Mr. Dad Jedi puts up a valiant fight, but since he's facing off against Darth Vader, it doesn't end well for him. You may have noticed this game indulges in QTEs, which pop up when you're ready to finish a boss fight and for certain mini-boss enemies. For the most part, these are thankfully not too irritating, and for the boss ones, missing a step just kind of puts you back at the start of the sequence rather than outright killing you. Vader engages in some non-consensual breath play and demands to know where the Jedi's master is, since he can sense someone far more powerful nearby. He gets his answer when his lightsaber jumps out of his hand and right into the hands of a scared child, the Jedi's secret son. Switching all his attention to the boy, Vader redacts Mr. Dad Jedi from the Kashyyyk census and approaches the child just in time for an Imperial officer and stormtroopers to arrive on the scene. The officer sees the boy holding Vader's lightsaber and immediately gives the order to shoot a child, only for all the Imperials to get slaughtered by Vader. Now, given that Vader isn't exactly against performing some severely late-term abortions, why would he murder his own side to protect this boy? Because he sees an opportunity to strike down the Emperor. There's no love between those two. Vader's loyalty is bought through fear and manipulation. If you rule through fear, you are always walking on thin ice, because there will inevitably come a point where people's fear of you metastasizes into anger, and contrary to what certain green Muppets proclaim, anger isn't always negative or destructive, but this is Star Wars, so it almost always is. Anyways, Vader takes the child and gives him a permanent emo phase by naming him Starkiller, raising him under a brutal and unforgiving Sith training regime for however many years it takes to go from a chubby-cheeked baby boy to a fully grown Sam Witwer. The book indicates 15 years and puts Galen Marek, Starkiller's real name, at 17 years old during the events of the game. The game indicates neither of these, beyond people referring to Starkiller as a boy. I'm just going to sidetrack for a moment to say that I very much appreciate Sam Witwer as a voice actor. He does not know the meaning of the word restraint, and his work as Darth Maul in the Clone Wars and Rebels series was amazing. He stole the attention in every scene he was in. Like, he didn't need to go as hard as he did, and yet. Moving on. With his training almost complete, Vader begins sending Starkiller out to kill renegade Jedi, starting with Master Ram Kota during an attack on an Imperial shipyard, and it's here we see there are already cracks in Starkiller's convictions. Given the nature of Starkiller's existence, a secret apprentice meant to one day help Vader overthrow Palpatine, he cannot risk being discovered before they're ready to act, and so Vader orders him to kill everyone at the shipyard, Kota, Kota's men, and the Imperials stationed or working there. A good bit of animation goes into his facial expression here, where you can tell he's obviously conflicted about killing his own side, but not conflicted enough to let it get in the way of his loyalty to Vader.
As you wish, my master.
Heading off to the hangar, Starkiller is jumped by a suspiciously young-looking Obi-Wan Kenobi, whom Starkiller dispatches with relative ease. Which is when we're introduced to Proxy, the closest thing this boy has to a friend. Proxy is a training droid who can take on the appearances and fighting styles of many different opponents, including Kenobi, and his primary directive is to kill the boy in combat. He is very apologetic when he fails to do so, and is otherwise very friendly and supportive, becoming a minor source of comic relief. They approach the ship, and Starkiller, a kidnapped, isolated, abused child soldier, experiences a moment of pretty girl panic when he sees the new pilot assigned to him, one Juno Eclipse. Proxy gives a rundown of her personnel file, revealing her impressive service in the Imperial Navy and her distinction of being one of the youngest accepted into the Academy. Juno interrupts the little conversation because her ears do in fact work, and they're all in this hangar alone, even if these two idiots did try to hide behind a crate. She understands why she's here and isn't fazed by the knowledge that Vader killed the last pilot assigned to Starkiller, presuming somewhat naively that Vader needs a good reason to casually choke someone to death. They make their way onto the ship, and quick side note, watch Proxy while they walk. He's clearly mimicking Juno down to the little hair tuck, and after passing her by, he then mimics Starkiller's broodier, hunched walk. It's neat. It's obvious from the get-go that Starkiller likes Juno but has no idea how to be normal about it, so he's rude and standoffish to compensate for the pretty girl panic. It's also obvious from the way he describes what he does for Vader, i.e. bring his enemies to justice, that Vader chose the exact wrong way to contextualize Starkiller's existence to him. What do you mean we're the bad guys? I thought this was about justice! We head to the Hutt-controlled planet of Nar Shaddaa, where the shipyard orbits, slaughtering everyone in our way as we fight through the production lines of Imperial TIE fighters, picking up holocrons along the way. These are not Sith Wayfinders, they're holocrons. The gold Jedi ones award points for leveling up your abilities, costumes, and lightsaber crystals, and the red Sith ones give you power-ups. I'm personally fond of the health drain aura, as I love most things that let me become a vampire. Needless to say, a lot of stormtroopers were also harassed mercilessly before we got to General Kota. The General isn't amused when Starkiller turns up to the observation room he's waiting in, however. He was expecting Darth Vader himself to show up after all the problems he's been causing the Empire, not send a boy no one has ever seen before. Seen and lived, anyway. As the fight grows chaotic, Starkiller proves more than a match for Kota, who decides to break the observation room off from the shipyard and send it hurtling down to the surface of Nar Shaddaa in an effort to kill the lad. The fight continues until they lock blades, whereupon Kota pulls some Jedi bullshit out of his ass and tells Starkiller that he can sense the boy's future and he'll be his master later. Annoyed by this, Starkiller promptly shoves the crossed blades into Kota's face, burning his eyes, and gives him the Disney death treatment by throwing him out of the falling observation room. Yeah, that'll definitely do it in this setting. Mission complete, Starkiller takes Koda's lightsaber to Vader and is sent back out to hunt another Jedi, Master Kazdan Paratus, on the junk planet of Raxus Prime. Now, The Force Unleashed was not the first time we visited this planet in a video game. The first time was back in 2002 with the Star Wars The Clone Wars game, where Obi-Wan and Anakin destroy a separatist excavation site on the planet. Why were the separatists digging on this toxic waste dump of a planet? Because thousands of years ago, the Sith created a weapon called the Dark Reaper, which was rediscovered by a Dark Lord of the Sith called Exar Kun sometime later. It needed a lot of power to function, so Exar Kun created a power source called the Force Harvester that would harvest the living force from anything and everything for energy. This naturally killed whatever was harvested, but turned that stolen energy into super deadly force-powered laser beams. This was eventually put a stop to by the Jedi of the time, who in typical Jedi fashion, instead of completely destroying the thing and dealing with the situation then and there, they just dismantled it and buried the components all around the galaxy like a war crime treasure hunt. Thousands of years later, during the Clone Wars, Count Dooku and the Separatists found it, dug up all the pieces, and used it, but Anakin was there, so it was thankfully destroyed after much avoidable carnage. Moving on. We fight our way through a bunch of Rhodian scavengers who call dibs on Raxus Prime's bounty of scrap and come across junk constructs that pull themselves together from otherwise inanimate material and start attacking anything that isn't them. It's quickly deduced that these are being animated by the Force, and this is thanks to Master Paratus. What is also thanks to Master Paratus is the presence of a Jedi Temple built out of scrap, at the pinnacle of which we fight him, surrounded by replicas of the Jedi Council he believes needs his protection. It's quite obvious during his fight that the grief and trauma of Order 66 and the isolation he's experienced on Raxus Prime has taken its toll on Paratus, but we're not here to offer sympathy, we're here to kill him and get his lightsaber, so rest in pieces.
In the arms of the angel.
With that, Vader sends us after one last target, a true test of Starkiller's strength after beating an old man and someone who really should have been in a hospital, Jedi Master Shaak Ti. Starkiller is impatient and insists that he's ready to face the Emperor now, but Vader refutes this and sends him on his way. It's worth noting that the way Vader communicates is through proxy, and for whatever reason it really seems to take a toll on the droid, which will be touched on later. Heading to the humid, mushroom-laden planet of Felucia, we get a brief scene of Shaak Ti taking note of our arrival. She sends her Padawan Maris Brood away for safety and has to insist because Maris wants to fight, and if you think this girl is going to go dark side later because of her goth appearance and desire to fight Darth Vader, then you are correct, because this is fucking Star Wars and rarely can someone be goth without also being evil. Anyways, we land on Felucia and the boy gets a snazzy new outfit. You may have noticed this is something that the game does for every new mission, but there are also a variety of other costumes to choose from, including running around as Mace Windu, a clone trooper, C-3PO of all things, or even Darth Sion. Look at how they massacred my boy. He looks like a fucking turtle. Most of the time you'll see me using the Sith Assassin costume because I just think it's neat. Worth noting on the Felucia outfit, however, is that it shows more of Starkiller's body than we've seen thus far, and this boy is covered in scars. Why his face isn't similarly messed up is a good question, but the scars he does have indicate just how brutal his upbringing was under Vader. Now, Felucia is one of my least favorite planets, purely because of the random teeth and pustules sticking out everywhere, and you may be wondering why in Palpatine's wrinkled forehead that is. It's because there's a gigantic sarlacc in this area, and its body is far more spread out in this warm, humid locale than it would be in the baked, sandy hell that is Tatooine. After playing with the wobbly physics of the mushrooms for a hot minute, we immediately run into the native Felucians, who are both innately force-sensitive and organized into a much greater threat than expected thanks to Shaak Ti training and organizing them. Fighting through the Felucians and their pet rancors, we eventually find our way to a place called the Ancient Abyss, where the Sarlacc's mouth is located, and where Shaak Ti is waiting for us.
Vader's assassin. Welcome to the Ancient Abyss. A place of sacrifice since time immemorial. Are you prepared to meet your fate?
If you recognize that voice but can't remember where, it's because the actress voices a bunch of NPCs in Skyrim. Once her health is low enough, Shaak Ti retreats deeper into the pit until we're right on the edge of the Sarlacc's mouth, where she continually calls the creature to crush Starkiller with its massive tentacles until he's had enough of this hentai bullshit and shocks both her and the creature until she stops fighting. On her last legs, Shaak Ti warned Starkiller that the Sith always betray one another, and that his power is wasted on Vader, before tipping backwards to become one with the tentacles, the Force. To become one with the Force. Which is a very dramatic affair here compared to what's seen in the films. The body of a Jedi will just turn immaterial, whereas in this game they erupt into a massive beam of light. I'm not against this, it was just unusual, unless someone can point to another game, comic, book where it's been depicted this way. Star Wars lore is far too expansive for anyone to know every possible detail. Having passed this final test, Starkiller returns to Vader in person, ready to enact the next part of their plans and finally achieve his sole purpose in life for the last 15 years.
You have lured the Emperor to us. When do we strike?
I did not summon him.
Unfortunately, without a major distraction to keep them busy, all Palpy's spies managed to sniff out Starkiller's existence and followed him back to Vader, resulting in the closest thing this boy has had to a father figure, impaling him, smashing him around the room just like he did to his actual father, and ejecting him into space through a sheet of transparasteel. It is rough.
Now you will kill him, or I will destroy you both.
Master, we can defeat him together!
Do it now, Lord Vader. Strike him down and prove your loyalty to me. Yes, kill him, Lord Vader!
This isn't the end for our edgy boy, however, as an Imperial droid gathers him up and delivers him to a medical research vessel called the Empirical, where he later awakens. He is understandably furious at Vader throwing him onto the bus like that, and despite Vader insisting that he had to make it look good to Palpatine, Starkiller is understandably sour, now more akin to a kicked dog than a loyal puppy. The plan this time is for Starkiller to sever all ties to his old life and set about raising an army of dissidents to distract the Emperor and his spies so they can create enough leeway to strike at him freely. Yes, The Force Unleashed put the creation of the Rebel Alliance on Vader trying to overthrow Palpatine with the power of one fucked up teenager, when what he actually needed to do that was his own fucked up teenager. Vader insists that no one can know Starkiller still serves him before he's revealed to just be broadcasting through proxy again. The droid is very relieved to see Starkiller alive because it means he'll one day get to kill him himself, but until then, he's here to help the boy however he can. Delightful. Now the instructions were very clear, cut all ties to your old life, but since Juno Eclipse is being held on this ship under charges of treason, is Starkiller going to do that? Is he fuck? No, he busts his way through the ship and rescues her right before the ship plunges into the sun, bridle carrying her away from danger while he declares that he's leaving the Empire behind. After a brief bit of contemplation on what to do next, Starkiller remembers what Coda said to him when they battled, and we head out in search of the old general. We cut to a scene on Kashyyyk where Princess Leia has just arrived and is greeted by Captain Ozzik Stern, an Imperial captain who proudly wears a sash made from the pelt of a Wookiee he hunted like an animal so that you know he's evil, even by Imperial standards. Leia is completely uninterested in his pleasantries, as she's fully aware that this is just diplomatic imprisonment to keep her father from speaking out against the Empire, and if you've watched the Clone Wars animated series, you've definitely heard their voices before.
Stern, we both know I was sent here as a hostage, to keep my father from speaking out against the Empire.
Then we both understand the situation, Senator. If your father keeps his mouth shut, I'll keep you out of harm's way.
Back with Starkiller, he finds Coda at a bar, much worse for wear than when we last saw him, and proceed to escort his staggering drunk ass through the waves of hostile Imperials. Though I struggle to feel like I'm fighting their best here. Thankfully, we're able to get him off the planet, and he points us to a contact in the Senate, which just so happens to take us to Kashyyyk because there's something precious to his contact down there that we need to retrieve. I wonder who would be considered an old friend of the Jedi Order, someone who would risk smuggling someone like Coda to safety, and it's Bail Organa, Leia's father. We land just short of the Imperial facilities, which just so happens to drop Starkiller in front of his old home. While he doesn't recognize it at first, he does feel something in the Force, and enters to be confronted with an apparition of his father. He's obviously rattled by this, but presses on with the mission, fighting through Imperial flame troopers that are setting fire to the underbrush, setting enslaved Wookiees free from their cages, and taking down every single AT-KT that we come across. If it somehow wasn't clear that Stern is a piece of shit, when we pass through his private quarters filled with all kinds of trophies from his many hunting trips, we can see a cage in the center of the room holding a shackled, abused Wookiee. Just beyond that, we find Princess Leia, and don't rescue her so much as let her know she can make her escape now, because Leia has and always will be an icon, slay, queen, etc. We can't leave just yet, however, as Leia charges Starkiller with destroying a skyhook the Empire have almost finished building. Once complete, it'll be used to ferry the Wookiees off-world as slaves, so by destroying it, the Wookiees will have a chance to regroup. And we also get the chance to turn Captain Stern into a stain on the ground, so that's a plus.
Wait! Let's be civil!
Afterwards, we sidetrack to check out the old Jedi Temple on Coruscant, as it's one of the DLCs that isn't part of a darker timeline and contains some noteworthy story bits, namely Starkiller finding a holocron with a message from his father. It urges him to complete the Jedi trials, insisting that he can still be saved from the dark side. During this, Starkiller faces a dark shadow of himself, the cybernetic shell of a person he becomes in the dark side ending of the game. He triumphs over this trial of the mind, but is left with a lingering echo of that dark reflection. The next step in our plan would be to talk to Bail Organa himself, but when Coda refused to rescue Leia at his request, he went to find Master Shaak Ti on Felucia instead. Starkiller almost gives away who he is by finishing Coda's sentence, but thankfully the old man just brushes it off as him being strong in the Force, and we head back to mushroom hentai hell once more. And it's somehow worse than it was the first time, because now it's all gloomy and dark-sided, including the locals who are feeling it, Mr. Krabs.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
So yeah, Bail didn't find Shaak Ti, he found Maris instead, and she's gone to the dark side. Oopsie doopsie, who could have seen that coming? Fighting our way through both Imperials and fucked up frog people, we find that the Imperials have taken over the ancient abyss using hooks and chains to pull the Sarlacc open for ease of access, its tentacles bloody and mutilated. Juno and Starkiller both express disgust over this, and we can sidetrack a little bit to break the chains, easing the creature's suffering somewhat. It's noted that the Empire is doing this because they're trying to wipe out the Felucians who chose to hide inside the Sarlacc out of desperation. We take the elevator down and follow their path through the Sarlacc's passages, and I hate every bit of being down here. This is not a good place. Look at this shit, it's getting slime all over our boy. Navigating through these wet caverns and tubes, we end up in its lung and get sneezed out in the exact direction we needed to go, a Rancor graveyard. We find Bail Organa here, and right as Starkiller gets him on his feet, Maris Brute turns up with her adorable pet bull Rancor to try and kill them both. Now, Maris is my least favorite boss fight because I find her mechanics deeply irritating, as she continually turns invisible and constantly throws her tonfas and blasts of energy at you, both of which stagger. Nonetheless, after killing the Rancor and collapsing the ground under its feet, we fight Maris in a smaller space and eventually defeat her, whereupon she begs for her life and promises to turn back from the dark side if she's allowed to flee. Starkiller lets her go, and she disappears into the Felucian jungle again.
You shouldn't have let her go free.
You really think she's free? She'll carry the memories of what she's done here forever.
Back at the ship, Bail, Coda, and Starkiller talk about the rebellion, and Bail agrees to gather everyone he knows is willing to fight, while our edgiest boy leaves to meditate on a suitable target that will show everyone the Empire is not invulnerable. And by meditate, I mean he talks to Vader through proxy again. Vader points him back to Raxus Prime, where the Empire is building Star Destroyers, their most recognizable ships and symbols of fear. Destroy the shipyard producing them, and we destroy the veil of invincibility that makes them terrifying. Before he leaves, Vader notes that Starkiller is growing attached to his new allies and needs to remember that the boy still ultimately serves him before anyone or anything else. Once he's gone, Proxy slumps and has this exchange with Starkiller.
I hate being him.
I think he does too.
Which, as a lover of the inherent tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, fucking kills me. Unfortunately for our edgy boy, Juno somehow managed to soundlessly Mission Impossible her way into the room without literally anyone noticing just long enough to discover that Starkiller is still obeying Vader. She is displeased by this after everything Vader did to them, as she was under the impression that this was all by Starkiller's own volition. Unfortunate. Heading back to Raxus Prime, we fight through more scavengers and eventually Imperials until we reach a massive ore cannon. The Imperials are melting down scrap and using it to manufacture new ships, reduce, reuse, recycle. But in the spirit of that, we're going to reduce, reuse, recycle this ore cannon to destroy the shipyard. Oh, and Proxy genuinely tries to kill Starkiller again right before this point, but it's fine, they both live. Taking out the shipyard does, however, gain the attention of one surviving Star Destroyer, causing it to descend and release TIE fighters on us, and even if you haven't played this game before, there's a good chance that as a Star Wars fan, you've heard of this scene at the very least. Everything else we've seen Starkiller do has been powerful and over the top. The boy is very strong in the Force, but it's this sequence more than anything else that seemed to break most people's suspension of disbelief. Unable to outrun the onslaught of TIE fighters or extract under the eye of a Star Destroyer, Coda urges our boy to rip it out of the sky using the Force. Starkiller is understandably stunned by this suggestion, but at Coda's urging to stop thinking in material terms, he starts to reach out and maneuver the colossal ship into a position where it is easier to pull down. This takes several attempts as you're harassed by waves of TIE fighters that need to be destroyed, but eventually, now. I think this is fucking cool. There have been Force users out there in the lore who've eaten entire worlds, created horrifying space werewolves, and one so powerful that she needs to be contained by a cage of black holes. So people decrying that this is too much feels quaint, but we will talk about this more in the follow-up video. Proxy emerges from the rubble and insists on being left behind because the shockwave damaged his processor and erased his primary programming, i.e. to kill Starkiller in combat. The boy ignores this request, of course, because his constant attempted murderer is his only friend. What a life. Updating Vader about his progress, the boy urges his master to give him more time to convince his nascent rebellion to act, and that to reveal anything now would destroy it all. Vader warns Starkiller not to take too long before contacting him again, and we descend to a remote snowy region on Corellia, where Bail and his allies have gathered, including Princess Leia. Even Coda turns up sober and clean without his blindfold, showing his renewed faith in fighting the Empire. If you have a bad feeling about this, you're correct to do so, because the Empire turns up to ruin everything. In the chaos of it, Bail tells Proxy to cut broadcast and Leia disappears, ensuring her involvement isn't discovered. The rebels are rounded up and Vader loudly praises Starkiller as his apprentice in front of them before yeeting him out of the ruins.
You agreed to stay away!
I lied, as I have from the very beginning.
You never planned to destroy the Emperor.
Not with you, no.
Seeing Starkiller's conflicted feelings for his new rebel allies as too much of a risk, Vader has decided to nip this rebellion in the bud in order to assure Palpatine that rooting out his enemies was the plan all along. Just as he's about to kill our favorite edgy boy, however, Proxy rushes Vader while disguised as Obi-Wan from the Clone Wars, which distracts him just long enough to let Starkiller safely drop from the cliff, but does result in our friendly droid's demise. Rest in pieces, King. Juno drags Starkiller in from freezing to death, and the boy meditates to figure out where Kota and the rebels were taken for their execution at the Emperor's hands. Now, given this game is set between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, there's really only one place suitable for a showdown with old Palpy, and that's his tricked-out disco station. I hear the laser show is killer. Obviously, Juno and our edgy boy have been growing closer over the course of this game, and Starkiller is almost certainly going to die rescuing the rebels, because he's never turned up before in the movies after his time, and it'd be really weird if a powerful Force user like him was absent from the biggest battles against the Empire going forward, so...
Am I going to see you again?
If I can free the rebels, they're gonna need extraction. Probably not, no.
Then I'll never need to live this down.
Dropping into the depths of the unfinished Death Star, we navigate our way through hallways, firing chambers, and deadly arrays filled with an obscene amount of bullshit until we're just about to reach the Emperor's room, where we see old Palps talking to the rebels. And I need you to know that Sam Witwer also voiced Palpatine in this game.
You are all traitors to the Empire. You will be interrogated, tortured. You will give me the names of your friends and allies. And then you will die.
I hope this man gets a live-action role in Star Wars one day, playing an unhinged Darksider, because he seems to really have fun with it. And yes, I know he briefly spoke as Maul in the Solo film, but Ray Park was the body, and dubbing over live action, even in the same language, almost never sounds or feels or looks correct. We're briefly stopped by Vader, beat his chosen one ass, and throw him through the Emperor's front doors, only to be confronted with a choice: finish off Vader, or save our friends. If you go to finish off Vader, you get the dark timeline where everyone is killed by the Emperor and Starkiller is turned into that dark reflection we saw at the Jedi Temple. If you go to save your friends, you get the normal timeline where our boy faces off against the Emperor and has him on the ground, ready to be killed.
Do it. Give in to your hatred.
He's beaten. Let it go.
And then Coda pulls the single most irritating card up a Jedi's sleeve: if you kill him, you'll be just like him, or no better, or wah wah, what are you, Catholic, give me the gun. We will also talk about this in the follow-up video. Regardless, Starkiller relents, and the Emperor, to everyone else's surprise but mine, leaps up and tries to kill them all with lightning. The boy holds it back and urges everyone else to flee onto Juno's ship, dying to ensure the rebellion survives. The Emperor and Vader stand over the boy's lifeless body, lamenting that with his friend's escape, Galen Marek has died a martyr for their cause. We cut away to Galen's old home on Kashyyyk, where the rebels have gathered to discuss their future, and Leia proposes they use his family's crest as a symbol of their group, wiping away the ashes of Imperial conquest to reveal it. Juno is standing off to the side watching the stars, and when Coda approaches her, she accuses him of knowing who Galen was all along, to which he answers that he at least suspected.
Then why did you help us, after all the things we'd done?
When he came to me in the bar, among all his dark thoughts, I glimpsed one bright spot. One beautiful thing he held on to, even at the end.
What?
You.
Damn, if he had been gay or aromantic, y'all would have been fucked. And on that note, we are done with our recap of The Force Unleashed. If you're interested in hearing some more in-depth thoughts about the story and the mess that is The Force Unleashed 2, keep your eyes peeled for the storyboard video. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have a game you'd like to inflict on me. Special shout out to my supporters on Patreon who are all very handsome people, and if you'd also like to be called a very handsome people, check out the link in the description. Patrons of all tiers get access to uncensored videos in the event YouTube doesn't like the content of the game I'm covering, and patrons of the affectionate nerd tier get to see behind the scenes content and intros for upcoming videos. If you're interested in consuming some of my ADHD adult nonsense unfiltered by editing, I also stream on Twitch every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 PM British summertime. Thank you for watching, remember to take your medication, drink your water, be kind to yourselves, and I will see you all next time.